1, 2, 3. I got sunshine
on a cloudy day. When it's cold outside,
I got the month of May.
I guess you'd say, what can make me feel this way?
My girl,
My girl,
my girl, talking about my girl, my girl. Ooh, ooh.
I love that.
Yes, ma'am. Good way to start it off. I'm Brian Tierney. This is the Blessed Life University podcast, the Blue Podcast for short. With me today is my co-host, Kimmy Larson of Zen Boutique Life Coaching. I also have with me Tilsa P. Fernandez. She is a Teamster and pension analyst. She is the founder of Divine Yoni Goddess plus Divine Wedding Vows. She is a co-host in the Cafecito con Las Chingonas, and she's a mother of 7 beautiful children. Also with me is Claudia Bertacchi. She is an attorney with the law office of the Cook County Public Defender. She is currently assigned to the Felony Trial Division at the, what did you put on there? The Layton Criminal Courthouse at 26 plus California. She represents people accused of serious crimes that can get anywhere from 1 year to life in prison. She is also a certified, what do you got on there? What is that? Catechist, and has been teaching religious education for the past 10 years. For those of the listeners out there who don't know what a catechist is, myself included, could you tell us a little bit more about that?
So a catechist is a teacher that teaches religious education to those that need to make their sacraments. So I initially used to teach high school students every Saturday, but then now I'm teaching 16 and older that are considered adults in the church, and basically they're preparing to make sacraments, whether it's baptism, First Holy Communion, or the sacrament of confirmation. So that's what I do every Tuesday night at Our Lady of Mount Carmel in Melrose Park.
In Melrose Park. Were you from there? Were you roots there?
I'm not, but Our Lady of Mount Carmel is the historic Italian parish of Melrose Park. So I started going to that parish 10 years ago because they still have Italian Mass there. I'm Italian. And then I just really like the environment. Now it's predominantly Hispanic, so it's a very, very large community. It's a very great community to teach at, and yeah, so that's my volunteer opportunities that I do.
That's awesome.
Got to spread the faith.
Yeah, and you know what? I believe in values in general, whether it's religious values or just, values like freedom of speech or freedom of choice in America. I'm a strong supporter of those things, and so I believe in values guiding people, and I feel that for a while, who knows how long, maybe 50, 60 years, we've been kind of a country lost out at sea, and we don't really have the moral compass that we used to. Mm-hmm. And, technology changed that a lot, because years ago, there would be more of a sense of community about things, like people were in bowling leagues together, and they all knew each other, and everybody knew their neighbors, and there would be barbecues, and they'd share something with each other, like, doing little potluck dinners and stuff. And now it's kind of more like you live on your own, by yourself, away from your parents, in another city. You don't know your neighbors. You don't know, the people around you that well. And
and it's hard to get to know people because people are not personable anymore.
Yeah, a lot of people seem to have tunnel vision on their own thing, and that's just kind of the way society has taken us. Mm-hmm. And so I believe in values of all kinds to kind of bring us back together again. And I will be a voice for, values like freedom of speech and all these different things, and freedom of choice and freedom of religion, till there's not a breath left in my body. So it's all good. So
amen to that.
Amen. Blessed Life University, it's all good. I had went out to a fine Italian restaurant. Shout out to, I was there last night. Shout out to Ciao Ragazzi, right over here on Archer and Narragansett. Goddamn fine Italian restaurant. Everything is good there. They treat you like family. I met the owner last night, really good dude. So I look forward to going back there. I went out with a few friends of mine. It was a birthday girl, Veronica Fernandez, had her birthday. We had a nice dinner, and then we ended up going over to Zoe's on Archer Avenue, which used to be Bohica. Earlier in the day, I was golfing with a good friend of mine, Yvette Kano, and between the golfing and the dancing for like 3 hours, 4 hours at Zoe's, my body aches all over, and I'm like, is this what 37's like? What's 38 gonna be like? Because holy shit, you know?
Oh, wait till you hit 53.
Well, nobody here is at that age, so we can't speak from experience on that
I
matter. Can you?
Yeah, I can.
Well, God bless you and your lovely genes, Kimmy, because I would never guess you were 53 years
You
old.
look amazing.
Thank you.
Amazing.
That's the laughter.
Goddess.
And the meditation and the friggin'.
Oh my goodness.
Occasionally locking herself outside in the cold on her friggin' patio
Oh my
outside her
God,
condo
it was
with the keys inside, having to call her friend to come and let her
Save me.
inside.
I locked myself out. I have the regular doors to go out to the balcony, and then through my bedroom there's another door. So the front balcony doors, it's locked for some reason. I can't get it unlocked, so I have to call the association to fix that. So I go out my bedroom door, I close it, and it locked. And it was freezing outside. I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna freeze to death. And I finally had a friend of mine. So I was out, he came over to let me in. It was about 45 minutes out on the balcony.
This was like, what, 2 or 3 weeks ago?
Yes,
So it was pretty cold.
yeah.
And you should have seen her. Some TikToker got her on video to try to stay warm while she was out there. She had the fucking PGs on and fucking her phone and shit.
Wim Hof method it.
Staying alive.
Survival tips. Wow.
Listen to that out there, everybody. We got some energy in here at the Blessed Life University podcast today. So we're approaching Valentine's Day, and you know, love can be good, it can be bad, it can be downright ugly, and that's kind of what we're here to talk about today. I have some very qualified guests here to talk about domestic violence and you know, what it is, what forms it comes in, whether it's physical or mental, and what to look out for if you are going through this, what actions you can take, and resources for your help. Or part of the balanced perspective that we have here today is also if you've been accused, perhaps falsely, because anybody can make an accusation. That doesn't mean that it's true, and it does have to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. So we'll talk about all that here. I think I'm going to go around starting to my right and work my way around with just a little bit about what it is that you do specifically for victims of domestic violence, the different things you offer as services, and how you can help people. So Kimmy, how is it that you help victims of domestic violence, you know, maybe be during and also after they've been victim of abuse?
I will get a phone call from an investigator. His name is Carlos Rodriguez. He owns Total Protection Consultant Services. And I'll get a call from him. He'll have me come out to the victim's home, and I will you know, calm her down, let her know that I will be at her side at court to go and get the order of protection, and then continue to help her through that whole process, or him. We've had males as well. So I want to again give that shout out to Total Protection Consultants. So if you are a victim of domestic violence, please reach out to, and I'll say it slowly, 773-593-4233. Again,
more time.
Yep. 773-593-4233. Or you can call this number, 773-499-5004. 773-499-5004.
And just a quick follow-up question for you. What kind of structure do you need in place after somebody has been a victim of domestic violence? So of course you mentioned getting restraining orders to make it, you know, illegal for that person to come within a certain distance of the, you know, of the victim. And so what else do they need to do as far as getting structure in their life, and perhaps like the transition from being in an abusive relationship to, you know, being independent and finding strength and achieving your goals outside of that? How do you help folks with that?
We will definitely find them a place to go to where they're going to be safe. So say there's a friend that your husband or significant other doesn't know about or doesn't know where that person lives. We would take that individual to that person's house, because you never want to take that individual to someone that they know together.
Right, because then these assholes are going to be over there causing trouble, parking their
Yes.
car out front, come out here to talk to me, let me in.
Yes.
All this fucking bullshit that these scumbag guys do.
Yeah.
Or gals, like fucking Left Eye from TLC or some shit, you know what I mean? Burning houses down.
Mm-hmm.
But,
Exactly.
don't go chasing waterfalls. We needed to put out the house that you said. I'm fine.
But Carlos Rodriguez is a wonderful human being. He is for the victim 100%. He is also involved in human trafficking, saved over hundreds of women from human trafficking, and then going back to kidnapping, you know, of the children, neglect, everything that you can think of under the sun. This man does.
Well, he sounds like a really good guy, and he also sounds like the kind of guy who we should have on the podcast.
I will
someday.
definitely have him on the podcast.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Tilsa, you have so much interesting stuff to tell people. It seems
Yes.
like you have a million facets to your life, and you juggle them all well, and you have a beautiful smile, and you have style and grace, so good for
Absolutely.
you,
Thank
as
you.
you all do. But I'm just kind of excited to learn, because you mentioned to us that, you know, prior to getting on the podcast, you have your new goddess temple that you got. So that's in...
so excited.
Yes, I just got the keys today, so that's a new venture in itself. So I'm super, super excited to be able to finally have a place where I can have my goddesses come and start their healing process. So
healing after domestic violence.
during,
During
before, during and after. So I kind of, I'm the founder of Divine Yoni Goddess, and I started that from my own adversity. And what I found in my journey is that I didn't have the support system. Being middle income, I didn't have access to a lot of things. And I'm pretty sure that all women feel like that at certain points, especially if you're a mom. I'm a mom of 7. So leaving my situation required a whole lot. It was financially, extremely expensive, but also like going through the process, I was in therapy too. It's really important to seek help. Counseling is really important. Therapy is really important before you make these steps. So you want to make sure that anything that you go into, that you know that you're grounded, you're mentally stable enough to kind of navigate through it, and all the challenges when you're going through a divorce or separating, and how to go about that, because although there are manuals, when you're in the situation, it's kind of like you're blinded from everything. So it took collaborative efforts from obviously a close friend. Majority of my friends didn't know that I was going through my struggles at all. To everyone just saw me like constantly grinding, working many hours, and they just saw beautiful pictures on Facebook, and no one really knew
Yes.
like the back end of it. I know my best friend, she's like, I see you every single day, and I didn't know like you were going through all this stuff until finally I broke down after a few years, and she's like, this is the first time I have seen you cry or even shed emotion at all.
Why do you think it took you, or why do you think you were able to keep that, from other people around you, and what was the point where you finally felt comfortable enough to tell people about that?
So I was raised in a predominantly Hispanic household, and we were always raised that you never talk about your issues outside, you don't air them out. And while I'm still at that point where you don't just talk about all of your issues on Facebook, there was a sense of like, I didn't want to be that type of person that was yo-yoing, like I'm leaving him and then coming back, I'm leaving him, I'm coming back, and everyone got involved too. The first time that I left, my mom was called, and I was labeled as a crazy, unstable one. And I'm like, okay, I don't want this to happen the next time. When I leave, I need to firmly leave and not rely on anyone else. Being a mom of 7, like, not only did I have to remove myself from the entire situation, but I financially had to plan for 7 other children. And
Yeah.
obviously the financial aspects, if it's hard for just one person to leave, and start from ground zero, it's going to be harder when you have children. So you need to make sure that whatever steps you take, that there are secure steps to that.
And then can I interject 1 second?
Absolutely.
So it's really hard for women in a relationship or marriage to go to counseling because of the narcissist that they're married to.
Yes.
Sociopath or whatever have you. The woman would not be able to go to counseling or
Exactly.
even sneak to counseling because they're being watched.
Right.
So
I had to actually plan around that. You're actually very right on that. I had to plan that I'm having a lot of anxiety. I'm having a lot of issues with racism at work. So that was my segue to get into therapy. And honestly, I went into therapy because I wanted my therapist to change my mindset that I was supposed to endure. And that's the hardest
Yes.
moment, is that you think that this is the right, you're supposed to endure so much abuse, and that is not the way.
I gotta give you a hug. I know
Sorry.
what you've gone through. You're so strong
Thank you.
and you're so empowered. And I love that. I just met you and I love you.
There's tissues right there.
Oh, sorry for getting all.
I try to have
No,
everything that we
that's
could need in front of us.
okay.
You start sneezing,
Oh,
we
yeah.
got it covered.
So it's that was my segue to actually get the help that I needed, and I kind of got the help thinking that I was the problem. So when I was
course.
doing the exercises with my therapist, she's like, well, she didn't really tell me, like, hey, by the way, Tilsa, you're wrong. She kind of, through the sessions, I discovered, like, holy shit, how would my life look outside of this situation? And what example am I giving my daughters and sons? I'm giving my sons the idea that it's okay to treat women like shit.
Yes.
It's okay to exploit your significant other. It's okay to not, be in a very, although it wasn't, I would say, although we didn't fight as much in front of our children, they felt that when they got home. Like, you feel that toxicity.
The negative energy between you.
Absolutely. So it took me a whole year for counseling in order for me to come to those senses that I needed to make.
So I have something because of what you do, and you can explain that more. I think that women who are going through this, you could be their segue into going into counseling.
Yes.
And so if they're afraid to go to therapy because of their significant other, at least they can say, I'm going to get my nails done.
Right.
Well, the nice thing about technology is there's online therapy services you can do the same way you do your podcast.
Right.
Is I've been hearing this being advertised on podcasts a lot now lately. It's called BetterHelp, and so if you're a woman who's having a hard time going to a physical location, and you're at work or a man, whatever the abuse situation is, you can take time during your break or whatever the case may be, and perhaps even find a specialist who kind of just their niche is just domestic violence.
Yes.
And you can do that at the job without having to worry about being fired, like on your break or your lunch, or get there early or stay there late to get that out of the way. Because,
true.
The idea that people stalk each other is a weird fucking concept for me. Maybe it's just because I was raised well and it's not in my DNA, but like I see people who like are obsessed with their exes and they can't accept the fact that it's over and move on. And part of
It
that
does
is
not happen that way, and
No.
yeah, I wish it did.
me too. And it's sad because like they don't understand the problems with them and they don't want it to be, but they don't want to change either. And so the nasty repetitive cycle continues.
Yes.
But tell us a little bit about what you do with your goddess temple and the services you offer to people to heal.
So out of obviously my own adversity, I discovered things that didn't necessarily work for me, especially going through a divorce. I knew, like, while going through therapy, she's like, you may want to consider going to get like Xanax or something like that. It didn't necessarily work for me because as a woman who's going through you're going to court, you're facing a judge. You can't look like you're,
Trunked
numb.
up or something.
Right.
Yeah. You don't even have any emotions.
Right. Exactly.
What's in the best interest of child?
Right, exactly. So for myself, I was using essential oils 7 years prior to going through a divorce. And I'm like, well, I use this for my children. I use, lavender to calm them down. Let me
Yes.
try using it for myself. And I learned that with essential oils, breathing techniques that I learned with my therapist, like that was honestly just helping me so much more. It wasn't enough, though. I will say it wasn't enough, but it was just enough to get me through that time. When I finally left, I literally left with nothing but mattresses and clothes because he just wanted to fight over everything. And sometimes, you have to make those conscious decisions. Don't fight over things. Just things are replaceable. So as I'm going through my journey, I started discovering things here and there. Finally, my divorce got finalized, and I bumped into this amazing soul, Lillian Suarez, who is one of my mentors, and I started my spiritual healing from there, and I got certified in Reiki, Shamanism, sound healing, and I started, instead of taking the fight and outwards and just blaming him for everything, because at one point we loved each other too. At one point we did.
People fall in and out of love.
Yeah.
Exactly. It was falling out of love, and where he couldn't detach from it. And that's where I kind of learned about the whole narcissism, empaths, and how narcissists love empaths because they're constantly feeding
They're
energy.
very vulnerable.
Exactly. So, so I kind of learned, I got certified in everything. And I started taking the healing inward, investing in myself. Instead of investing the same way how we give our partners second, third, fifth, 10th, 20th chances, start giving that self to yourself. Start giving yourself a second chance. If you don't do it correctly, you have the following day to get up and do it again. So I started focusing obviously on my own healing and discovering different aspects of myself and discovering different healing modalities. I wish I would have had obviously during therapy, but I'm still nevertheless grateful for everything that she did for myself. But as I'm going through my healing process, I also started meeting other women that went through the sexual exploitation, and I'm going to share all this stuff. And it's like, let's remove the energy from all those, all those pictures, like learning soul retrievals, learning too that whatever traumas you have in your childhood, they also manifest as adults.
Yes, they do.
And learning that too. So pretty much I came up with Divine Yoni Goddess because our energy as women, as a divine, come from our womb. We give birth to life. It's not a place to store fear. And that's where we store majority of our fears. We have, all these gynecological issues because these are all traumas that we're holding on from childhood. And obviously now learning all of those modalities and learning how, I didn't know that I was holding on to ancestral trauma in my womb. Jesus, a lot of things started making sense. So of course I started getting more creative with the products that I started creating. I got Reiki. Reiki was one of the most amazing healing modalities that I came across.
And tell us what Reiki is, because I have a friend who's a Reiki master. I don't know what that means. I know it's like sound healing and touch
It's energy
healing
yes.
through touching and speaking. Tell us what it's all about.
So pretty much the healing modalities is more of an energy. Some of us are intuitives, we're mediums and psychics, and there's variations of it. We definitely feel all the chakras and feel like wherever there's displacements, a lot of us, like our root chakra, for example, when our root chakra is basically in our baseline, if we don't have a foundation for ourselves energetically wise, that will in turn transfer into either emotional issues or convert into different chronic disorders. And it all comes from our emotions.
Because of the effect of stress on the body from the emotions you're feeling and not having a way to externalize those or to heal them.
Exactly.
So Reiki then again is in summary.
In summary, it's energy healing for your aura, for your internal, and it just depends there's different kind of modalities. I'm a Reiki master, so as a Reiki master, not only do I have the fundamentals, but I could also teach it. That's basically what it is.
If you're
We're
a
also
master, you can teach
instructors,
it.
yeah, and we could pass on the rights to others.
And how about the shamanism? That I'm not familiar with either.
Shamanism.
I always thought that was some like voodoo, black magic shit. I wasn't really sure. But
No, and a lot of people think that. That's no, shamanism is more so like getting in tune with nature. Obviously, we use a lot of energies, different energies, animal energy. Every single animal has its own energy, and it's honestly like and I would say from someone who was raised Catholic, like we were raised to follow someone. Shamanism teaches you to go within, trusting yourself and connecting with nature. It is the same thing essentially. I feel like for myself, like learning and knowing and participating in both aspects, it's the same thing because we're all connected to the divine. We're all connected to God. God just looks differently to all of us.
So I have a question. So do you work with men as well or just women?
So I primarily work with women. Men are more so on a referral basis.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so if it's someone who is 30 years old, between 30, 35 or whatever, and went through a lot of childhood trauma, and he brings that trauma with him through his life, and now it affects the relationships that he has with, being jealous, and the stalking part starts to kick in, things like that. So would Reiki help someone through that kind of process?
I would say a combination of shamanism and Reiki, because you definitely want to remove the cord of that, of your connection from we want to acknowledge the past, right?
Yeah.
We want to acknowledge, but we want to free that person from being trapped into that child that experienced so much trauma. Therefore, now he's manifesting it, or he's being a participant.
Hurt people, and they project that outward.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. That's
so
awesome.
let me ask you before we shift over to Claudia. Where were you at in your life when and I mean like as far as where you're at, like work-wise, family-wise, where were you at when you started going into the divorce and you were experiencing all these things? What were you juggling in your life when you were trying to make a change in the right direction? Where were you at?
I was at a point where I literally thought that everything was my fault. And only because I went to therapy did I later discover that. So I will say this, when you're in the wrong relationship, you're at fault for everything. You feel that, though. You honestly believe that. You believe that you're like the worst piece of shit person, and everything would be better off without you. So I was at an extremely low when I started making those decisions. It's kind of like I hit rock bottom in that relationship, and I had to build myself up. And there was a lot of things that happened during that time that kind of brought my awareness. So I wanted more out of life, first and foremost. I wanted, I wanted to go to school to be an attorney, but I couldn't do it, obviously, because I'm raising a family. And everything was more so on making him successful, and the leftovers were for me. So I was in a time in my life where I was very unhappy with the career choices. I've always centered my career choices around the wellness of my children, making sure that I was always there. But I felt like I was working 24/7.
So at that point, you already had 7 children?
Yes, I already had 7
children. So
children.
you're full 7 children.
7 children.
And you were working with the Teamsters at that time?
Yes, I was working at with the Teamsters at that time. I had made one career move at that time. I went from working for a corporation to being a unionized employee, and honestly, that also helped out because you can apply for FMLA when you're going through. I think it's called Versa, if I'm not mistaken.
Arissa?
Arissa, there you go. Sorry. There you go.
I was going to say, you got me, but Kimmy filled in the blank there. As an attorney, I'm not really sure.
Honestly,
we don't have all the answers.
Arissa law, honestly, learning about that, I didn't know that there was laws in place to protect me as an employee to keep my job while juggling all these crazy things in the background. Like you want to make sure that you protect your livelihood, because you will need all those funds when you're going through divorce court. I mean, it was above $10K, and we had no assets on top of that. Like, it was a constant fight. So you want to make sure that you secure your baseline at all times and be very, very careful. So at that time, I believe I had like $7,000 saved too. and I had already pre-planned my getaway. If things get to the point where he's gonna kill me, I had an extra pair of clothes in the trunk of my car, along with birth certificates and everything that I needed to kind of get out.
Yeah. No, you went through a lot, and you are so absolutely amazing. Before I even heard this story, I'm just like, wow, she is really amazing. And you are so incredibly strong, and you're so empowered, and I love how you are empowering other women to do the same.
Thank you.
So thank you for that.
Thank you.
No, thank you. I really appreciate that. It takes a lot for someone to get up and keep moving forward, and then to help other women.
Yes. And then the shame, too, that you bring upon your family,
Yes.
quote unquote, for even speaking up. I know, like, I knew I didn't count on the support of many due to obviously who wants to support a mom with their 7 kids, So I knew that I kind of had to make my own financial decisions. And I needed to secure that segue for everyone's sake. And that's another thing, like, who's going to support you during that time.
Right.
So it is what it is. And I'm grateful honestly, I am also grateful for going through all those challenges. Because of that, I am who I am today.
Yes, yes.
And you turned out to be a great person.
Thank you.
I met you through a mutual friend. Shout out to Cindy Mesa, another really strong, woman, a good businesswoman, and a dear friend of mine. And so I'm glad our lives have crossed paths, and I look forward to getting to know you better as time goes on. And
Yes, me too.
I don't like losing touch with people. I feel like my life is this blessed life accumulation of all these people I've met, and in some way I am a collection of all the people I've met in my life. And so as we shift over for Claudia, as you mentioned, working with the Public Defender's Office, you see a variety of criminal matters all the way to trial and beyond, and you see the good, bad, and the ugly in society. And not everybody is guilty who is accused. Again, they must be proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And so I don't know if you want to talk about just some general things that you've encountered in your career, and then kind of focus in on domestic violence particularly, and the things that people should know as they are accused, especially those who are falsely accused, and what they can do about it, and also maybe what victims can look out for based on real life factual scenarios you've seen. So take it away.
Okay, I'm going to take a different approach here, but
do whatever you'd like.
Thank you, Tilsa, for your testament, because there are women that are really suffering out there, and I have seen that too in my years of practice, but I've also seen the opposite end of it, where there's false accusations. So before I became an attorney with the Public Defender's Office, actually in 2015, that's when I got licensed, I started my own law office, and I was primarily doing family law, so divorces, and real estate, and estate planning.
Good
so
for you. Good for you.
it was great. There's a lot of money to be made in the family law business. However, it the sake of your sanity. So when I got offered a job with the Public Defender's Office, it was a no-brainer for me to leave, to dissolve my family law practice. So I still do my real estate law and estate planning after hours on the side, because it's transactional work. But when you get hired with the Public Defender's Office, you can't do any litigation in any capacity other than a public defender. So I was at the point, I was so jaded from all of the family law cases that I had, and I was like, wow, I guess I'm never getting married after seeing everything that I saw. I mean, it's just, my observation was, and I know this, this is not a divorce podcast today, we'll say that for another day, but just really briefly, my observation was that it all came down to one thing: money. It really did. It didn't come down to even the kids, sadly enough. It really came down to money. And that really crushed me. That really crushed me because you see the people who vowed their lives for each other were now at each other's throats, and it got very ugly. And I said, I cannot do this for the rest of my life. So it was a blessing to get hired to be an attorney in the public defender's office. So once I thought that life was gone, where did they assign me? Well, not right away, but one of my assignments was over a year in the domestic violence courtroom. In Maywood, at the Maywood Courthouse. So specifically, what I would do is I only handled cases that involved domestic violence. So there were some felonies, anywhere from misdemeanors and felonies that involved domestic violence. And I would describe that as family law and steroids. I mean, I thought family law was bad, and now I'm like, oh, great, now here comes the ghost from the past to haunt me. But what I learned in my year in that courtroom was that it's not so much actually like family law. And the reason being is I did see that it really was black and white. Family law could be a lot of gray, he said, she said, but when you're defending someone, there really is the truth and then there's the lie, right? It either happened or it didn't happen.
The actual truth in between his side, her side, or vice versa.
Right. And then one of the quotes that I like is whenever a spouse or whenever someone is murdered, the first suspect is always the spouse. And that tells you everything you need to know about marriage or relationships. Really, it does.
Yeah, and it's kind of sad, right?
If you think about it. But it just shows you it's in love grand, right? So I defended people who were accused of anything from assault, a violation of an order of protection, domestic battery. I did not handle aggravated domestic battery cases. Those are usually like class 2 felonies. That was another courtroom. So basically like the basic misdemeanors and then felony violations of orders of protection. So a lot of people think, okay, well, it's always, boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, but it's not. It's any domestic relationship. So what does that mean? That could be an aunt and a cousin, grandparents, siblings. Okay, so I like to say the first case of domestic violence in our history, it was Cain and Abel, right? Cain killed Abel. That was the first incident of domestic violence,
Cain,
right?
Man, you got to keep an eye on that guy.
Right, he was just jealous of Abel, right?
Low to see these snakes out there.
Take it all the way back to Genesis, right? So it's any family relationship. So right off the bat, and also exes too. So like an ex-girlfriend, ex-boyfriend, that still counts because you had a previous dating relationship. Now, if it was a dating relationship 10 years ago, that doesn't count. But usually, more recent. So the first thing to know is that the police have to absolutely make an arrest. It's not like other types of cases where, there has to be some sort of probable cause to arrest someone. It's a little more lenient when it comes to domestic violence cases. So, for example, girlfriend calls the police on boyfriend and police show up, the police have to make an arrest. So someone's going into custody, okay, no matter what, and then you got to just deal with it in court. So that's the first thing to keep in mind is there's always an arrest that has to be made. Why? Because God forbid they don't make an arrest and now someone's murdered,
right? Exactly.
Right? Then whose fault is it? It really goes down to the police, right? They should have made that arrest. So that's why to cover their own self, they have to make the arrest. Okay, so then once someone is arrested, then, they're brought before the judge. Now, a lot of the clients that I had were claimed to be innocent, right? Now, some talk the talk, but some really were. So I took a lot of cases to trial. I had a jury trial, and that was a not guilty. That was a very, very interesting case. So in that case, my client was charged with assault. And he was arrested for allegedly holding up a butter knife to, and that's another thing. In the criminal defense world, we don't use the word victim. We use complaining witness, right? Because again, you're not a victim until
you've been proven guilty.
Right. So in the beginning, you're just a complaining witness. You're complaining about some act that happens. So the complaining witness alleged that my client held a butter knife in his hand not even to her throat or anything, just held it in his hand and said, "Give me sex or I'll kill you." Okay. And the police she calls the police show up, and he's arrested, right? So I won't get into all the details, but we had a jury trial, and through the jury trial, I was able, to convince 12 jurors that the complaining witness was lying and that she did fabricate the story through all of the evidence that was presented. And, of course, my client, he had tears of joy at the end, because he was accused of something that he didn't do. There's a lot of backstory to show the motive that she had to make it up, right? So I ran across a lot of those situations where, there would be, a girlfriend going through boyfriend's phone, find a proof of cheating, and then what did she do? Oh, well, she wants some sort of retaliation. She'll call the police on him. Okay, so I saw this a lot too. But then I also saw, on the non-romantic side, really sad cases where there was one of my clients, he was 18 years old, and he got arrested for domestic battery, and the charge was that he pushed his mother. It wasn't even like a push. It was like the way the complaint was described. It was just like a slight little nudge. Yeah. And he got arrested for it. So obviously, mother and son had a very toxic relationship for a mother to call the police on her own son for something like that. And that was a very sad case. I guess in that case, she ended up getting just an order of protection against him. And then
How old was the son?
He was 18. Right? But the point being, any unwanted touch is domestic battery, okay? So people think, no, domestic battery, you actually have to have injuries. No, that's not true at all.
So to keep your hands to yourself.
Right.
Okay.
So any unwanted touch, you don't need any pictures of proof that there was any unwanted touch. All you need to say is to the police, he pushed me, he grabbed me, he bumped into me. All of that is domestic violence.
Which means that if somebody makes an accusation, it's a very serious accusation that's going to require defense in order to protect yourself if it is a false allegation, because it's that easy to get somebody brought in on a very, very serious charge that you cannot get rid of off of your record, expunged or sealed, unless you had the case dismissed.
Correct.
Somehow, before trial or after.
Right, and there's also
before trial, but after arrest or something like that.
Right, now there's also constitutional consequences. So if you do have a domestic battery conviction on your background, you forfeit your rights basically to own a firearm. Now, theoretically speaking, you could probably get one. However, the Illinois side, at least I'm not aware of any cases where the Illinois State Police will actually issue a FOID card for someone that has been convicted of domestic violence, domestic battery, I should say. That really does not happen at all. So
I would imagine not.
Right. So a lot of times, if people are own firearms, they are hesitant to plead guilty. They're hesitant to even go to trial to take that chance. So oftentimes if the state would offer to maybe amend it to something that's not domestic battery, where they could receive some sort of supervision, then usually they'll take that deal, right? Because they don't want to take their chances at trial and lose that right to own a firearm. So there's a lot of consequences to keep in mind. Now, one thing I don't like about the law is the order of protection. Okay, so the order of protection is to protect the complaining witness, okay? So the complaining witness is saying, I'm so scared of whoever it is, cousin, boyfriend, husband, sibling, whoever the familial relationship is with. I'm so scared of them that I don't want them to contact me in any way, okay? Then we'll have instances of the complaining witness reaching out to my clients saying, I miss you, or, just any sort of conversation.
And then the order of protection is void.
Well, no, you would think it's void, right? It's not, though, because then if my client were to respond, guess who's in trouble? My clients, okay?
Right.
So, for example, complaining witness could say, happy birthday, okay? And then my client could respond, and then he or she can go to the police with proof of these messages, and then my client would get arrested, for violating an order, no contact order of protection.
And just to play that out one step further, in that example, which is kind of an extreme one, but I'm sure it happens, complaining witness has order of protection. They reach out and the accused responds back, and then they go running to the police. They get arrested, and maybe at hearings prior to trial or something, I'm guessing the judge would use their discretion and be like, what is this nonsense? Like, you got an order of protection. You said you didn't want to talk to this person. Now you seemingly lured them into violating their own order of protection. Those are unclean hands, if you ask me. So, like, I don't know, would that get held up, or would they dismiss that for, you know what I mean? Like, that's game playing.
No, actually, you would think so, right?
Wow.
You would think so, because the complaining witness should not reach out to the defendant. But the judge it depends on the judge, right? But most judges will say, okay, well, did the defendant have any contact with the complaining witness? And if the answer is yes, it's a violation.
So it's a very strict
It's
liability.
like, yes,
It's
exactly.
a very strict liability.
And that's something that needs to change.
So the accused needs to know, if somebody has an order of protection against you, that is like no communication, no, interaction in person, it's a very serious thing. And if you want to avoid trouble with the criminal justice system, you want to avoid, losing other rights that you have outside of your freedom, work and things like that, that you need to be, it is no contact, like zero tolerance. I don't give a shit, if they send you that friggin', what do they call those? Sexting or whatever, little skimpy photo there or something, like you don't respond back, even if they're trying to like give you the birthday cake and eat it too, basically, is what you're saying.
Well, this is where therapy comes in. The complaining witness needs to go to therapy, needs to go to Reiki, become one with herself.
Right.
So she is not reaching out to that person saying she misses him, because she may not have that network of family or network of friends, to help empower her and make her strong.
And you know what? The funny thing about this order of protection is, why don't we make that a two-way street, right? Because, like, if somebody is going to say that they are, afraid enough of somebody or have been abused enough by somebody, it should be both ways around. But obviously the focus, the weight of it should be on the accused. If this person is, in fact, proven to be guilty, then they're not the kind of person who should be contacting them. But why don't we make that the other way around too, to avoid this playing games by victims? Because you know how petty people are right now with social media and shit and talking, and it's always like, people don't seem to feel nowadays, and this is just in general, not like all the time, but they feel like it's okay to air their business and their laundry out in public, put it on social media, talk shit, ruin people's lives, like they're entitled to do this. Like, life isn't a fucking game, you know what I mean? So, like, why can't we make that both ways? Or can the accused then file, like, a counter order of protection when they've been accused as well, and saying, well, then that's fine, but no fucking contact with me either, because I'm not playing these bullshit games. My life and livelihood is on the line.
Well, that's the thing. When there is already a order of protection in place against a defendant, the defendant cannot file a counter one. But there's two types of order of protections. There's the no contact order of protection, so that literally means what it is, no contact by any means. And then there's no unlawful contact, which is, no harassing, no physical abuse, no interfering with liberty, no stalking, so anything unlawful. But that is a very, very slippery slope. And what I would tell clients that got no unlawful contact is to never be alone ever with the complaining witness, and to not even have any communication via text message or phone call. I realize sometimes there's children involved, like, picking up, dropping off children. And I always advise, at least when there's a criminal case going on, to always, do your exchange of children at the police station.
Yes,
because I can't tell you how many times I had cases come in where, it was no unlawful contact
inside the actual department or in the parking lot? What are we doing? Like, just so we know, like, the logistics of it?
Either, right, because there's cameras everywhere there. But I can't tell you how many times I had people that had no unlawful contact order of protection, and then, the complaining witness would say, oh, well, this happened during, when I picked up the kids or whatever, and then The defendant is saying, no, that did not happen. So now what is it? It's he said, she said. Okay, you have that situation. Well, why don't we just avoid that possibility altogether and never be alone with the complaining witness? Therefore, you can never be accused of something, right? So people think, okay, well, it's no unlawful contact. I'm not going to do anything. That could be true. You may not do anything to the complaining witness, but if the complaining witness has some sort of grudge or, wants to make an accusation up, there's nothing from stopping them from doing that.
So I have a question. So the complaining witness, and she'll say, oh, he pushed me, he slapped me, whatever have you, and it's founded that the complaining her significant other did not do any of those things. Do you think perhaps she said that to have him arrested because of all the emotional abuse that she was going through, the gaslighting, all of that stuff, and she was just tired of it, and the only way out was
The
to
revenge
say,
part.
was to say that.
I mean, it's a case by case basis. That's the thing. So like I acknowledged, like domestic violence obviously very much exists, but then there's also that portion, like I said, in my at least year in that courtroom, seeing just very unique situations. Like for example, the jury trial I had where she accused her husband of saying, give me sex or I'll kill you. I mean, there's a backstory to that. She wasn't from this country, the complaining witness, and she thought the only way that she could have full custody of her child was to, say that he did this and put him in jail. So she wasn't familiar with the laws or how it worked. So a lot of people just, they have this taste for revenge. That's what I've seen. And unfortunately, I think the ones that are the most difficult to deal with is when it's literally like your parents and children. It's incredible how a parent can have such a toxic relationship with their child, and it's very sad. It's very, very sad to see that. And I think those, they are the ones that really should be in the counseling, right, to repair those relationships. Because when you're calling the police on your son that slightly bumped into you, that's pretty problematic, right?
See, the problem about having children is there's a lot of people who shouldn't have children, but they're able to do it, and they do, and then by no fault of your own, you have been born to somebody who's just not fit to be a parent.
Right. And what's interesting about these cases, the police show up after the fact, right? So they just have to go by whatever the complaining witness says. Okay, so they're not, for the most part, police don't witness most of the cases of domestic violence.
Afterwards.
Right. They show up and they do their job and they investigate. Now, unfortunately for police, domestic violence calls are the most dangerous out of all of the calls. You saw what happened to that the officers in New York. They were this was a few weeks ago. They were just shot and killed, responding to a domestic violence call.
No kidding.
So the police, when police are called to domestic violence call, that's known as the call nobody wants to take, right?
I didn't realize that.
Yes, because for those situations where it really is an escalated situation of domestic violence, I mean, you have people who aren't thinking rationally. And in the case in New York, for example, I mean, the guy had a gun and killed both of these police officers. And now, their kids are left childless and the wives husbandless. I mean, it really is tragic.
God bless those families.
Yeah, and the police who are tasked with sorting all this out, this is something Kimmy and I talk about. One of her friends is a retired police officer with a PhD. He started a company where he's going to be assisting police officers with transitioning to life after that, because for both police officers and firemen and firewomen and members of the service, it's a real transition after you wear this uniform. It's a very regimented lifestyle to be a part of, and then to go out into life after that, it's challenging.
Right. So just to add more to the order of protection. So those are the two types.
Yeah. So repeat those back real quick as we summarize.
So what I would tell my client is, if there's an order of protection in place, even if it's no unlawful contact, don't contact them. Just consider it no contact whatsoever, because I think it's just like I said, it's a very slippery slope when it's no unlawful contact. So I always advise them when a case is pending, just don't communicate at all with them. And especially don't post anything on Facebook or any other social media, because all of that can be used against you in court.
How about intermediaries? Like mom has to say, hey, can he pick up the kids or something like
There's
that?
apps for that. Like our
there's
our
apps now.
family wizard. It costs like $100, but it's the best app you could possibly invest in.
Well, so here's the problem now. Okay, so let's say, because this has happened a lot of times. So my client and complaining witness, they have a child together, okay? And it's a no contact order of protection. That's no contact, not even through a Talking Parents app or anything. Oh, wow. So then what has to be done? Well, if my client wants to see their child, it's up to them to open up a case in the Domestic Relations Division and to establish their rights as a father or, as a mother, but for the most part, it was always, fathers that I was representing, that they were not allowed to see their children. So during the pendency of a criminal case, if you don't have a domestic relations case started, you can't see your children. No, absolutely
Really?
not.
So if you didn't already have a domestic relations case open in order to see your children, and once you're accused, that's foreclosed for until the criminal matter's over?
No, it's not foreclosed. You can still have a pending criminal case and start a domestic. Right,
okay.
right.
Makes more sense.
Right, but then again, the problem, as an attorney with the Public Defender's Office, whom I'm representing, people that cannot afford attorneys, that's we're appointed to represent. So then the question becomes, well, I don't have money to hire an attorney. And the civil division could be a very complex division to do on your own to establish your rights. I know there's help desk and stuff, but it still could be very complicated. So that's a situation they find themselves in, and you don't get a free attorney with family law cases or any other civil cases. It's just for the criminal cases. So I've seen that a lot, but when it's no contact, it's no contact. And if you have, let's say, your mom contact them, that's a violation, because no third-party contact.
Use third parties. Oh, that's
right.
what
You cannot use third parties.
Yeah,
because
I was like, how do these people communicate? You would really have to start the domestic relations case about the child custody.
Right.
One question I was going to ask you too, unless you want to, was there a point you were finishing up, because you were summarizing a little bit the two?
Oh yeah, so I just wanted to add another thing that I would see a lot of is, so the charge of a violation of an order of protection, it could be a felony depending on the situation, but for the most part it's a Class A misdemeanor, punishable up to a year in jail. If there is an order of protection in place, okay, the only one that can get rid of that order of protection is by a judge's signature through a court order. Now, there were instances where, boyfriend and girlfriend, they get into a fight, she gets an order of protection, there's an order of protection in place. Months pass by, girlfriend comes to boyfriend and says, hey, I got rid of that order of protection, we could be together again, okay?
That's toxic.
Right, no, right,
But
right.
it happens.
Yes, but the point being, what does boyfriend do? He's like, oh, okay, great. There's no order of protection in place. So he's taking girlfriend's word for it, okay? So then what happens? So then several months later, guess who gets called? Police get called. All they do is put his name in. Sir, you have an active order of protection and you're here at this residence. You're going into custody.
Yeah, you're coming on
right. So now he's charged with the violation of an order of protection.
How long does an order of protection last?
So the maximum time is 2 years. You could always get it renewed after 2 years. You can go back into court, and the court can extend it. But the maximum time is 2 years. But again, it could be extended. So my client in that case, that was a very unfortunate circumstance. The dad of the girlfriend didn't like my client. So he called the police and said, hey, so-and-so is at this address and he's not supposed to be there. And then the police come and they arrested him just for being there. Now, the girlfriend in that case wasn't even the complaining witness. It was more the police. Like, they signed off on the complaint because they looked at his name. They're like, well, sir, you have there's an active order of protection against you. You can't be here. But the girlfriend said there was nothing at all that happened. She explained, how she's estranged from her father. Her father doesn't like him, called the police. And he sat in Cook County Jail for quite some time for quite some time for that, and it was a very difficult situation. He ended up pleading guilty, though, because the order of protection was active. Okay, even though she insisted it wasn't, there was no proof showing that order of protection was vacated. We ordered transcripts. I mean, we went through that whole court file.
Right.
It took so many different court dates to get to the bottom of it. But the bottom line was he relied on her word that there was no order of protection
Which you
in
can't
place.
do.
Right. So what I tell people is, unless you pull a St. Thomas, right? Unless you physically see it yourself, then do not believe what other people are telling you. You have
Yeah.
to physically see that order of protection was vacated. So even if, again, if girlfriend made up the story and she realized she did wrong and now she wants to be back with you and she says there's no more order of protection in place, you could be the happiest couple ever. But if the police see you with her and they see you have an order of protection, you're going to jail.
Let's say I'm the dude too. It's
Right.
like,
Right.
hey boo, I want to get back together. Like,
Right.
don't worry about that order of protection. I'm like, all right, cool. I'll be over there as soon as you run into the courthouse and get that
Yeah.
shit vacated.
Exactly.
And we can have a Netflix and chill night. You know what I'm talking about? So anyway, I was going to ask you, for somebody accused of, I don't know, you can maybe examine misdemeanors and felonies as well, but somebody accused of domestic violence, regardless of the severity of the charge, are they looking at being in, like you said, county jail or being held until their trial takes place or whatever, depending on the severity of the charge? So if it's like a pretty bad battery, the accusation and, maybe the police observations and photographs from that time prove that, there was some kind of violence. The question is whether it was done by this individual or et cetera, and things like that. How much time are they looking at, or how long
So-
could they be stuck in there awaiting trial and hearings and things like that?
Like a class 1 or class 2 felony, that's significant time in prison. But the majority of the cases that I dealt with in that room, like I said, they were not significant times in prison cases. The most serious was a class 4 felony, which is only 1 to 3 years in prison. So that was the most severe cases that I dealt with in that courtroom, at least. But the misdemeanors, it's up to a year in jail.
Once upon conviction, it can
Right.
be up to a year.
Right.
But so for misdemeanors, they're not held in prison until trial, but for felonies they are? Or how does that work?
No. So it depends on the bond. So for example, how is bond set? Do they pose a real and present danger to the complaining witness and to the community? Sometimes the judge could set a significant bond that they can't afford, and then they're sitting in jail until they either plead guilty or go to trial. So it really depends on what the judge puts as a bond.
Okay.
Right.
Sounds good.
But I mean, I guess the point is, if you're one that can't afford a bond and you truly didn't do the crime, well, unfortunately, you're sitting in jail until the case gets resolved. So, I mean, that's just part of our criminal justice system. A lot of people like to think, well, if someone's arrested, then they definitely did it. But that's not the case at all. I mean, there are innocent people sitting in Cook County Jail right now.
Yeah, we've heard some tragic
Right.
instances throughout our history as a country of people who were wrongly accused and who
Yeah.
were even convicted on wrongful accusations.
Right.
One unrelated, non-related question that I have is, in Illinois, they got rid of cash bail or cash bond within the last year. I think that was signed
Well,
into
that
law.
hasn't gone into effect yet.
Oh, okay.
Has
So it
that
hasn't gone into effect yet, but
Right.
it has been signed into law.
I believe so, but it hasn't. They haven't really told us what to expect of that.
Yeah. What
But
what does that mean for people? Because it confuses the shit out of me.
So, the cash bail is actually really interesting because, I never understood it. So, here, for example, working in the domestic violence courtroom. Okay. All right. So, the judge says that the defendant poses a real and present danger to the complaining witness. But then he'll impose, I don't know, let's say $5,000 D bond. Okay. So, they have to post 10%.
D-bond?
Yes.
What does that mean?
A D bond. So basically, a D bond is where you have to post 10% of the amount. So if it's 5,000 D, you got to post $500 to get out of custody. Okay. Now $500, most of us, that's nothing, right? But again, if you are
To
indigent,
some people,
five-
it's a lot.
right,
Yeah.
$50
It's all relative.
could be a
Yeah.
lot to some people that don't have anything. So if someone is such a
didn't-
real and
yeah.
present danger and they have to pay $500 to get out, okay, well, let's assume they have the 500. So they pay $500 to get out, and now they're no longer a real and present danger because they paid. You see,
That's
that doesn't
crazy.
It's
make any sense.
nonsensical bullshit
So
that we
it-
deal with. Yeah.
Right. It's like being pregnant. Okay, you're either pregnant or you're not pregnant. There's nothing in between. So it's either you're a real and present danger to society or you're not a real and present danger, because what you're doing then is saying, okay, if you pay this money, you get out, and now you're not a real and present danger. Okay. That's the problem. So I think what the new law is going to do is that, if you're a real and present danger, you're no bail. Okay, so no amount of bail. You're sitting there till trial.
So this actually sounds like perhaps a more positive thing then.
I think it makes a lot more sense, because what you're doing is telling people that if you post this amount of money, then you can go out and,
Do whatever
Yeah.
you want.
do whatever you want.
Hey, I'm
even
Bill
though,
Gates. I'm going to go
Right,
fuck a bunch of people
right.
up and I can get
Yeah.
out because I
Right.
can pay the bill. Or
Even
Jeff
though I'm the
Bezos,
judge and I'm
fucking guy.
saying you're a real and present danger, okay, if you post this money, now you're out in society, even though I literally just declared you a real and present danger.
Yeah, it's
So-
hypocrisy. Like how much money affects our legal system and our way of life in general, like with political speech, fucking money speech, like, well, guess who's going to speak the loudest then? The motherfuckers with the most money. Because, you know what I mean? Like, I can't speak as loudly as, like, Coca-Cola can or whoever it may be,
Right, right.
with money anyway.
And I don't know if I said this, but also I think I mentioned if you're convicted of domestic battery, then your firearms you can't own firearms. However, during the pendency of a domestic case, your firearms get taken away. So if you have, a $50,000 collection of firearms, guess who gets all that during the pendency of the case?
The state holds it until it's been
Well, the
determined whether
police,
you're-
the police.
Yeah, it's in an evidence
And
locker
good
or
luck
some
getting
shit.
it
Yes.
back, because technically you're supposed to get it back. Let's say if the case is, you're found not guilty or whatever, you're supposed to that's your property. You should get it back.
Fucking right, you should.
But no, you have to jump through so many hoops to get your firearms back. It's not like you just walk into the station, they're like, oh, here you go.
Hey,
No.
here for my guns. Are they ready? I called in like
Right.
Domino's like 10 minutes before
Right.
I came.
Right.
Yeah, do you have them all set to go? I'm ready to get back at it with the guns.
But then there was also cases where I found myself kind of yelling at my clients, like, why are you putting yourself in this situation? Okay, so for example, it's their 5th arrest of the same complaining witness, okay? And mind you, they're saying they didn't do anything, okay? So they're innocent. Okay, let's assume that's true, all right? Why are you with her then if she literally keeps calling the police on you? Okay, so if you're
Some people
so
get turned on
innocent-
by weird things.
Right, if you're
I'm
so
kidding.
innocent,
That's a
why are you
narcissist.
right?
Going back.
Why are you with her if she literally keeps calling the police on you every other week? Oh,
And they both need help at that point.
Right. And speaking of both needing help, so what I would find a lot of is mutual combat. Okay, so a lot of people, they grow up in very violent households, and all they know is violence.
Right.
Okay,
That's
so
their
they're
blueprint.
right. So they're victims themselves. So I'm talking about males and females.
Right.
Okay, so now they get in an argument. Now it's mutual combat. Okay, they're both throwing punches. So. It really comes down to, I think, the counseling aspect, that people that have had, unfortunately, traumatic childhoods, if they don't go to counseling, they will carry those traumas into their relationship. So if all they know is corporal punishment, that's all they're going to practice, right?
I feel like there's a lot of things that are not taught in the education system that really should be, because like even me for myself, growing up, like my dad was an Irish immigrant, my mom was a child of her mother immigrated from Ireland, and her father lived here, but they pick up these bad habits or some of the shit from the old school because they didn't have the cell phones and all these fancy computers and shit that we have nowadays. So, like, they had these bad habits that they passed down to generations. You really don't learn how to deal with that until you get out in the real world. So I feel like the education system could really help, or especially for people who need it. Like, if you had after-school
We need a
programs.
support system.
Yeah, a support system with
even
specific
in the court
topics.
system. Exactly.
Right.
You
Right.
should always have, and I feel like that's something that lacks. If you don't have insurance, you don't have access to counseling, and if you do, it's very limited. I mean, can you imagine like the abundance of workload that these counseling services do have? They have millions of clients and they can't get to everyone, and they can't provide that care that's required. All they're there is just listening and just jotting down a few things. We need a support system for both, you know,
Right.
the victim and obviously the
I
aggressor.
absolutely
Because they're
agree.
both victims at one point. That's one thing that I did learn from
Right.
my situation. You're both victims, and you both need healing.
So I'm glad you brought that up, because in the courtroom I was in, at least, it was more of a kind of like a healing approach, right? So it's like, we're not going to send this guy to jail because that's not going to change him.
Right.
So I want to say 99% of the sentences, like if they pled guilty, it would be, they'd have to do counseling. So for example, they'd have to go through, I believe it was a 24 or 26 week domestic violence classes. Okay. So it's just like it sounds like. So teaching about like domestic violence, what's not okay.
Anger management.
Right. There's anger management classes. Some people have to go through like mental health evaluation and treatment for that. So that was the sentence. So they would be on like court supervision for what's called conditional discharge, which is an actual conviction. Supervision isn't a conviction. The difference between the two is your background. You have a terrible background, you're getting conditional discharge, or it's kind of like probation, think of it. If this is your first arrest and the complaining witness agrees to it, because the complaining witness has to agree to the sentence. That's one thing that a lot of people don't realize. So if the complaining witness is like, absolutely not, this guy needs to be in jail, at least the state's attorney I worked with would not go against the complaining witness's wishes and desires. But for the most part, there were very, very reasonable offers. And then for that year or 2 years that they were on either probation or supervision, they had to keep reporting to the social service department. So they would have to report their progress. They would have to, they'd have court dates if there was a violation. And the judge that I was in front of took violations very seriously. If you missed your classes, you're going to jail, okay?
Yeah.
Every Friday was violation day, and it was a nightmare to deal with, because there's always the one, oh, I didn't know who I was supposed to contact, or I didn't have money to get to the but for bus fare to get to the classes. The judge does not care. You could literally have lost all your limbs, and he still expects you to go to these classes, because the classes are very important, right? Because if someone's pleading guilty to a domestic battery, they're telling the court that they did what's alleged in the complaints, right? So if they're in fact saying they did that, then they do need serious help for that.
Right.
And that's why the judge would take that very seriously if there was a violation.
Okay.
So the thing that I was saying, or kind of it comes circle back to what I was mentioning earlier about things that need to be taught in the classroom to give children and so on an outside perspective outside of what they're learning in the home, because the home is that base where it's the most you're gonna absorb the most there as a sponge. Like watching your parents and listening to what they say, is conflict resolution should be taught in classes, because I feel like if you're gonna put somebody who's hardened by life, who let's just assume an example of a guilty person who was found guilty, you're gonna give them a class. It's like they're already hardened by life, they're jaded, they have maybe grew up in violence, they're already molded by this, they don't know anything else. I think at that point the class is not going to be really that helpful. But if we intervened as a society with classes or after school care where they talk about these
It
things,
should be in health class.
Yeah.
In high school. It should be taught as they're freshmen. Or even 8th grade going into high school, because
you're old
they're
enough
now
to really
dating.
process things. Yeah.
Well, yeah, they're dating, and then they have, of course, their parents or their aunt and uncle or something. So it should be something that's taught in health class.
There's a lot of those things, but I think definitely
Yeah.
conflict resolution is one of them. In
Most
addition
definitely.
to actually teaching people how to defend themselves, not necessarily for, we're not trying to like mold elite fighters necessarily in a school, although it could help people go down that route if they wanted to, which we really need in America, I feel, as far as how we compare to other militaries across the world. Because a lot of things have been perverted in this society, and we want them to be things that they're not intended, that they were never really intended to be. But why I say that is it's a good outlet, it's good exercise, and it actually it creates a respect for conflict because you know what energy it takes to get into that struggle. On the alternative side of that, if you're a violent person and you're not getting conflict resolution classes, maybe it makes you even better fucking at being violent. But the point is just like, if they taught these things, people who, life's a rough place to be in. You could go out there and somebody tries to mug you. They're just waiting around, looking around. Oh, there's somebody right now. Like, this is going to be the person. I already have my game plan in mind. They don't know this is coming. Blah, blah, blah. If you knew how to react to a situation like that, although you're at a disadvantage at first, you can turn the tables on somebody who wasn't expecting it, and that throws off their whole game too. So I feel like conflict resolution, also perhaps some arm-to-arm combat, whether it's wrestling, boxing, jiu-jitsu, something.
Yes.
I'll leave you guys on that note because I got to pee real quick. You ladies, talk about whatever your heart's desire. I think Kimmy might have had a few bullet points to keep the kindling of this conversation. We'll edit it out.
I do have a question.
Sure, yes.
So do you ever come across cases where there is a cop or someone in the law enforcement industry being accused of this? Of domestic violence.
And there have been. I have seen police officers get arrested for domestic violence. However, we're not appointed to represent them because,
Right.
I mean, come on, they're employed as a police officer. We're only appointed to represent the indigent. So you're going to have a hard time convincing the court that you
Right.
deserve a free attorney when you're a full-time police officer, right?
Right.
So I've never represented a police officer. I have not seen our office get appointed to one.
Okay.
Usually they always have private attorneys.
Right.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
But yeah, I mean, the thing that people don't realize is that, they tend to, and this is not just domestic violence defendants, just I'd say defendants in general, is they look down on them like, oh, how could they get arrested for that? But I think what people fail to realize is that could have been me, right? You could have been at the wrong place at the wrong time, or you could have been in the wrong relationship.
Right.
Right. I mean, like I said, all it literally takes is a phone call to the police and say X, Y, and Z happened for them to get arrested, right? So I feel like people that make comments about, those that are accused of domestic violence or arrested for it don't really understand the situation and just how easy it is for someone to get arrested.
Right.
But, it's definitely a huge category, because like I said, I mean, you coming and sharing your story, and there are definitely women that are survivors of this, but there are also people that are wrongfully accused.
Right.
So, you have
it's
to
true.
really know how to identify both of them.
Right.
So,
All right, I want to touch base back on domestic violence, and I want to mention, and I wrote it down so I don't mess it up, but there's on average 20 people per minute that are physically abused by an intimate partner. And during 1 year, this equates to more than 10 million women or men who are victims of domestic violence. So I felt that was really important to say that men are also victims of domestic violence. So it's just not women. And men, it's okay to reach out to any of the numbers that were mentioned earlier in the podcast. So please do.
yeah, we all seem to know that the societal stereotype is that it's men
just
doing the
women.
abuse, but it is the other way around too. I don't know if it's just we hear about the situations more often, or the numbers actually, set forth that it is really the males doing it more often. But we know that it goes both ways.
Right.
There's none of us here think that women can act violently too, or have issues that they're, ruin them in life to the point where they're doing this to people out in the real world too.
Yeah, it's 1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men that experience severe intimate partner physical violence.
Right.
So,
And I did have a client that was a female, and she really beat the hell out of this guy. So
yeah,
she did. So definitely it does go both ways too. But obviously, we see it more with women. But yeah,
well, it's
definitely.
because
Right.
men are too ashamed to go forward, and they don't need to be ashamed.
Right.
They should come forward.
For sure. And it can be tough, you know, it's, men have different emotions and well, they have the same emotions, but I mean is they have their own emotions and, you know, they don't always know how to deal with that too.
Yeah,
so
and
I'm
it's
sure
like
they could
you
use the help.
said, you know, men are empaths too.
Yes.
So, and even because they relate to their mother a lot, you know, and that's
Exactly.
what makes them become that empath, and then
That,
they're
what does that mean, empath?
Empath is someone who can feel and empathize with everyone. So
That's me.
for a narcissist that can finagle their way into any situation, obviously, you know, their story is always like, you know, extreme. And as an empath, you always want to coddle that person. You always want to make sure that you're doing everything for that person so that person feels safe, secure,
Yeah.
well, and they know that. So they consistently, you know,
So they seek out those people,
Absolutely,
or they
yeah.
find this out as they meet you, and then
Well, they
then
find
they
that
use
as-
their ugly ass mental weapon of arsenals of emotional abuse and manipulation and all this shit.
Yeah, well, it starts with the conversation. So when you're first meeting someone and you're having that conversation with a man or a woman, and whoever that narcissist is going to say to themselves, oh, okay, I got someone who is very vulnerable. This is going to be easy for me to gaslight.
right. And then
So they do
remove
that from
you.
the first time they meet you. They're basically assessing you and like
Yes.
learning
Right.
your mannerisms, your physical characteristics. How do you react to things? Are you more, do you take control over the situation, or do you react to it more? Or are
That's
you,
right.
yeah? So they're
And they-
summing this all up in their
Right,
mind.
and they also make themselves into a savior. Like they're always saving you when there is
Yes.
no, or creating chaos, and then they're always a savior. So it's one way where I always had your back when your mom put you out. It's like, well, not necessarily. My mom was upset, you know, for my situation. I always refer, you know, so they're always a savior of every single
Everything.
thing. And they create, when they feel like you're slipping away, they'll create something toxic and they're pinning you against your own family. So you don't have a support system. It's just yourself and them, and they're
Right.
your everything.
Yes.
It's so weird to think that fucking mental framework is out there in a lot of people's heads, that this is just like this pattern where you have these people acting this way. It's like, maybe I was raised well or something, but like, or it's just that I'm not a narcissist, so I'm not affected by these impulses that these sick motherfuckers
Well,
feel. But my point is just, I can't believe that people think this way. Like,
But
there's a lot of people probably around me all the time, people that I know, they're like manipulating someone or physically abusing them and using all this mental like calculation and warfare. It just seems like, first of all, it's sad, but you know, it is what it is. It's out there. It's just kind of disgusting, you know?
Right, it is. And you have to remember, a narcissist becomes a narcissist because they were coddled from their mother, or they're coddled from their father. So they're always consistently looking to be coddled. And
The narcissist is,
yes,
but then they use what they learned about getting what they want in life to manipulate somebody else.
yes.
And normally they'll
shit.
go for someone
So
who's
don't
younger
fucking coddle
too.
your kids. Pull up their fucking, help them tie their shoes, put little Johnny out there, and let's teach that motherfucker some boxing or some fucking self-defense, right?
Yes.
For all these narcissists
Yes.
out there trying to fuck them over, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Am I right?
Line them up. No.
I'm terrible. You guys are like, I feel like I'm outnumbered here. I'm gonna fucking hang back. You guys do your thing. I'm kidding.
No.
But no, so you mentioned then that males can call that number as well. Was there anything else that you wanted to discuss
No,
or tell
that,
people?
that was it.
What about your services and what you can do to help people with what they're going through?
With life coaching, any woman or man who is feeling overwhelmed in their relationship, they don't understand the difference between being in a narcissistic, relationship and a toxic relationship, or both. They definitely can come in to see me. And I've mentioned this many times on our podcast, that I literally use a whiteboard so they can see what they're seeing or what they're speaking, what they're feeling. I write all of that on a whiteboard so they can then, oh my gosh, wow,
It's
I
that
said
transfer of
that.
energy when you.
Exactly.
It's very true what you're stating. When you have all these thoughts in your head, and when you start writing them down, and sometimes when you have a life coach and they're writing it, it all of a sudden clicks. Like, oh, okay, that doesn't even make sense, you know.
Yes.
But when it's all in your head, it's just you're part of that moment. You're,
Yeah. Exactly. So it's like your whole life is just a huge puzzle piece, and you're trying to find some sort of focus to put it all together. And being able to talk to someone like myself, who is completely unbiased to your lifestyle and life in itself, can help you put those pieces together. But you have to see what it is that you're saying inside your head and everything that you're feeling. Writing it on a whiteboard and actually seeing it, you can start putting it together. That's where I have a lot of clients break down and start crying like, oh my God, I'm finally releasing all of this bad toxic energy out of my system. And that's where you come in. I would love for, to send clients to you.
Absolutely. I like to focus on those roadblocks in your life, wherever you want to begin. And normally we
Yes.
don't begin from the very top. We have to hit rock bottom to build ourselves up. And it doesn't matter how many times you restart with yourself, as long as you're doing every time you restart, you're at least one step forward.
Yes.
You're one step closer to becoming the better version of yourself. And if there's one piece of advice that I could give anyone leaving a toxic relationship, is focus on your own healing. You will be the better version of yourself, and all those bricks that are being thrown at you, build your fucking empire, and fuck what anyone has to
Yes,
say.
amen.
Go after your dreams and aspirations unapologetically, and don't give a fuck what your family has to say. Start building a wall, a barrier, boundaries against anyone who isn't for you.
Yes.
You're either-
Don't tell anyone
Yeah.
what your plan is, because there are so many family members that are like, no, you can't do it.
Right.
I've had family members tell me I can't do it when I was when I just started college, get my psychology degree.
Get out.
Why are you doing that? That's so stupid. There's no money in that. And it's like, what?
Yeah, they
No.
critique
Money
you and
follows with your passion.
try to change your decision.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's not even about the money. It's about passion for me.
Right.
I've worked with several clients, either pro bono or what is it that you do for a living? Let me help you, because I don't want you walking out this door thinking, another thing I can't afford for me to get help. I will work with you. So that's huge, and it's so important.
I agree.
Yeah.
Amen, sis. High five.
Yeah, high five.
High five.
I was just
sis.
saying, that's for everybody.
Yeah. Empowered women. I love it.
Yep. The alpha male and the empowered women. That's the way I like to see
I love
things.
it.
You know what I mean? But how about you, Tilsa? What else did you want to tell people or leave people with about what you do and connecting with you and how to work with you?
So I have my Instagram, Divine Yoni Goddess. I'm also opening up my my center in Logan Square. So look for the Goddess Temple. So I'm super excited about that. And if there's something that I want to leave people with, is like, it starts with the feeling, with your own feelings, with your own dreams and aspirations. And if what you're currently in does not align with that, you have to make sure that you take that leap of faith and get yourself out. It starts with one step, and you slowly kind of everything's figure outable as long as you have passion and certainty in what you're doing.
Is there a number that people can reach
Oh
out?
yes, my phone. Well, my
I don't know
number.
if you want to put your cell out there, but I mean, you already mentioned your Instagram.
Yeah.
Can you spell that for everyone?
Let me see.
Divine.
Hold on. I just want to make sure that that's what I'm at on Instagram.
Okay.
So I have several Instagrams. Hold on.
I don't want them to miss a beat at all whatsoever.
Yeah, whatever the easiest way or the way you
Oh,
want people to
it's
contact you about this.
DIVINEYONI Goddess GODDESESS.
Awesome.
One more
Thank
time
you.
for the listeners.
DIVINEYONI GODDESS.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good stuff. A lot of positive things. I feel like one thing that I kind of thought of from your story or from the way you're speaking is that, like, being able to handle your problems well in life begins with self-care.
Yes.
Whether it's physical health, mental health, and I believe those are very, very interconnected. I've been doing my best to take care of myself. I've been going on the treadmill, I've been lifting weights, and various other kinds of cardio, including friggin' cutting a goddamn rung like a Southside savage on the dance floor. Which is real exercise. I'm like, why don't I just throw on like friggin' Tiesto mix and dance for like an hour? That's my fucking workout.
Facts.
But in any event, yeah, starting with self-care, doing exercise, yoga, meditation. I'm starting to dive into meditation, coming very soon. Yeah, because
Yes.
I do journal now, and I found that that's been super, super helpful lately. Like before I really start getting into things, before I started preparing for this podcast today, sat down with my delicious ass Dunkin' Donuts coffee, had my journal out. I recapped everything that happened over the course of the last day or so and how I felt about it and how excited I felt to have you guys coming on this evening, because I just know that like good things were going to happen. I know that we're going to have a good conversation and good content for people to listen to.
Yeah.
We gave them a little sunshine in the beginning at the beginning singing on the podcast. What about you, Claudia? What do you want to let people know about what it is that you do, what it is that you do to help people, and what they can learn, and just maybe just summarize a few things that you'd like to chat about?
Well, I guess I don't really help people unless they get arrested, right?
You're there for them in their darkest hour.
Right. No, I know. So one thing I did actually forget to mention is when there is a pending domestic case, the defendant is not allowed to return to the residence if they were living with the complaining witness. So what does that mean? Okay.
Take your stuff with you
Well,
when you're on your way out.
Well, no, you can't do that.
You can't tell the police officer,
right,
I need
no,
a few
no.
minutes to gather my stuff.
So, for example, let's say it's your house and you got a mortgage on the house and
Yeah.
you're paying all the bills. Well, guess what? You can't go back to your own house until the case is resolved. So there's that protection that's offered to complaining witnesses. So it does not matter if you're not on the lease or you're not on the mortgage. That does not matter in the eyes of the law. What matters is that they're concerned with protecting the safety of the complaining witness. But what does that translate to for the defendant? If you don't have anywhere else to go, you're going on the streets or to a shelter. Assuming that if there's people that don't have any family or friends here and that was their only place, then there really is no recourse. You have to just figure it out on your own. And, that could be sad too. But my advice to people, I was mentioning to Tilsa, like, any one of us could find ourselves arrested, right? It's by the grace of God that, we control our tempers, for example, or, a lot of people really are at the wrong place at the wrong time, or, in the unfortunate case that you really are innocent and you're in a relationship, and you really are innocent, and then, your partner calls the police on you for something you really didn't do. Again, it's by the grace of God that we're not in that same position. So it's easy for me to feel what my clients are going through in their darkest hour. My advice to people would be to not let a relationship ever get to that level, for example. There are always warning signs, right? There's always red flags in the beginning. And I would say to not ignore those red flags, because those red flags become a war zone eventually. So that would probably be my best advice I can give to people. But also, they say marriage is the longest prison sentence, right? So choose your prison mate wisely, whoever you choose to marry, because it is it's a life sentence. And this is not to talk down upon your divorce or anything, but I just would really tell people to just be careful who you choose to be either in a marriage with or in a relationship with, either one, because there is no hate like the hate for those that we once used to love, right? And you really see love makes people do the craziest of things. It makes people do the best of things, right, out of love. But it also makes people do the darkest of things, because it's that love drives these cases are crimes of passion, right? That's a key element in there, is that domestic relationship that you have with them. So I would just tell people to just be wary of who you partner with. But I think one thing we all have in common is the healing aspect, because we were talking about how, like, defendants too, maybe violence is all they grew up around, and that's literally all they know. So unless they go to counseling and these classes and they get the help, guess what? They'll be back in for a second domestic battery.
And
it
hopefully
right.
they want to do it for themselves and they're not being forced to.
Right. So, and the goal is obviously to change the behavior. And I think that if somebody wants to change behavior, and through the professional resources available, they can. It's just a matter of, like, really wanting it.
Yeah.
Well, on
Planting
that note,
seeds of peace.
Yes.
Plant the seed of peace. On that note, I guess I'll throw my own thoughts out there to kind of summarize some things, or some thoughts I was feeling is, one of the best things, you can do in life is be prepared. And what do I mean by that? It sounds like narcissists and domestic abusers are prepared with their plan. So, look out for yourself, be an independent thinker, and think of your plan as well. If something happens and you have to leave, do you have a family member or close friend by where you can stay with them? Do you have extra clothes stashed somewhere? Are all your belongings in that house? Or if you had to leave there and not come back, would you be able to get by without what you left there? So, think about those things in advance, and helping, getting help starts with trying to help yourself, and that will to help yourself.
Yes.
You have to have that, because those who don't want to be helped, you really can't help them. And it's sad sometimes, because there are people you love or things like that. But all that aside.
Oh, wait, one more thing.
Sure.
Also, people should stop abusing the criminal justice system, because a lot of people use the police as referees. Okay, I'm getting into an argument with my spouse, partner, and we're gonna call the police, and they're gonna arrest him. And then after 24 hours, 48 hours have passed by, they show up to court. They're like, I don't want to press charges anymore. That happens all the time, and it could have literally been a simple argument, nothing even severe. But again, the police have to make an arrest.
And sometimes victims. Oh, sorry. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
go ahead, because I think you're going to say what I'm going to say.
Sometimes the victims, they want to start establishing boundaries. Like, dude, I'm going to call the cops. So that you finally do it, but then you immediately regret it. You just want to teach almost a lesson, like, you can't treat me this way. But unfortunately, you snap right back to being a victim instead of a victor, and taking steps ahead of that, of getting, whether it's a financial thing, where am I going to feed my kids, the money coming in, who's going to pay rent if the person that's actually paying for all these bills is in jail. So there's always that instant regret, I would say, for victims. Some, not all, because I know, like, you are right, some people do abuse the criminal system, and it sucks. But a lot of victims don't have access to finances. They don't, and they're obviously aggressor is a person financially supporting the entire household. So you have to.
That's the reason that you would dismiss the charges. But I agree with all the points that are made. And number one is, don't abuse the criminal justice system, in the sense that it's already it's a very crowded place, and people have very high caseloads, and they don't need extra unnecessary nonsense being brought before them. But to your point also, it kind of just, I feel like being prepared is the best thing you can do, in the sense of, if you have been a prior victim of domestic abuse, are you going to remain the same personality-wise so that you can then again be manipulated by another person? Or are you going to start taking classes now, or things like that? Or are you going to start these healing processes now to be prepared for next time? And then also to, always have a safe spot or two. Like, what if so-and-so ends up leaving the state for work? Do I still have somebody else? Because if your choice is a shelter and the shelter is full, first of all, it's terrible to think about being a victim of violence and having to go to a shelter, and all that. And so, in any event, being prepared, and just, we've been through a crazy couple of years, and people are definitely more tense. Even I feel my tension at times, but that allows me to control it. So. But
again, keep in mind, it's not just a romantic relationship we're talking about here. So, My advice would be to parents. This isn't how we were raised, because domestic violence today could be something that was acceptable back then. Okay, if your parents chased you with a wooden spoon or a belt or something, that could be domestic violence now, right? So you have to be very careful whenever you use any physical unwanted touch with anyone, because you're right. I mean, everyone just thinks this is just a, romantic dispute, but it really isn't. And that's where I think people just have to be mindful of the relationships that they have with their entire family, because, that one aunt that can't stand you, all it takes is just one confrontation to escalate it all, and then next thing you know, you're in handcuffs in a police station, right?
Yeah.
And you may not have even done anything. There was one case I had too, just remembering Thanksgiving brawl. Two sisters.
Oh my.
Two sisters,
Yeah.
and poor mom cooked an amazing Thanksgiving dinner, and the two sisters, went at it. Food's everywhere. Food flew everywhere. Poor mom's Thanksgiving dinner's now all over the walls and the floor. So it's just to know who to stay away from, right? Who brings out the worst from you, stay away from them, and to just, how do you de-escalate the situation? You leave, right? A lot of times if someone's arrested, it's like, well, why did you stay there? If, your defense
They
was
wanted to fight too, otherwise they
right.
would've
If
fucked 'em up.
if your defense is you didn't do anything, then why didn't you remove yourself from the situation that you saw inevitably you'd get arrested for? And they never really have anything to say about that,
Yeah.
That's another
Right.
thing is I
Yeah.
feel that they don't really teach you how to envision the future, or they, to use your mind in that way. Your mind's a very strong thing, and that's why they always say that like really successful people envision that success and how they're going to get there in each step of the little movie, each scene in the movie before they get to that point, because then they can be in control of reality. Because if you can see it there, you can do your best to make it happen here.
Right.
Well, to any domestic violence, man or woman, make sure that you have a friend that your partner does not know about. So if you do need to leave to a safe place, that's exactly where you would go. And to what you were saying, make sure you have a bag of clothes, stashed somewhere so you have something to take with you.
All of your credentials.
And there's a lot of good non-for-profits, like there's Sarah's Inn, there's the Women's Center.
Yes.
There's so many different non-for-profits that you can go to as well. So,
Right.
money is not an issue.
But they could always reach out to Total Protection consultants or myself for all those types of ideas of where they can go for shelter
For more resources and things
and
like that.
resources.
And if you have a good family, stay very close with your family and don't let anybody just come in between that. None of these scumbags,
Yeah.
that are out there come in between you and your family. It's been a crazy couple of years, and COVID is contagious, but so is happiness.
Oh, there's been a lot of cases. It's funny. Right when COVID hit, the cases in the domestic violence room.
Of
through the
course,
roof.
guys
because
are
you're
good.
at home.
Right,
You're
right.
stuck at home.
Now I
you-
really got
right,
time to friggin'
Right. Now you
let
guys want
loose
to kill
on
each
you.
other because
Yeah.
you're with each other literally 24/7. But that's one thing we notice. You put someone in the same house long enough, and then they go crazy. Things happen. Tensions get high.
Man,
Yeah,
it's a crazy
definitely.
it's a crazy thing. Like, we live in an area where the outdoor crime picks up a lot when the weather's hot,
Right.
but then it's so cold in the winter, I guess
Right.
more of it maybe takes place inside, or
Right.
who knows how the numbers back that up. But COVID is contagious, so is happiness, and so what I say is that I've done really well and got along with a lot of different people from all sorts of different walks of life, and that's because I always try to start from a position of kindness and respect, regardless of where, what job that person has, or what their race is, or what their gender is. I believe really, really strongly in the words of Dr. Martin Luther King that we should judge people on the content of their characters and not the color of their skin. And so I know that people can get along with each other because I've been able to do that very successfully in my life. Not everybody is the same. Not everybody is confident or willing to take risks or willing to go on a limb. But I feel it's very simple to say, good morning to somebody. How are you? Whatever the case may be. Even if it's just some driver, hey, good morning. I'd like blah, 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 right? Let people know that you think about them as a person before you start asking them to do things. And I feel if we just all kind of extend these courtesies to each other and be nice, that, your world will be a better place, and so will everybody else's. The universe will reflect that positivity back to you. So all I gotta say is, stay sharp, stay blessed, be good to yourself, be good to your family, be good to your community, and tune in to the next episode and check out what we got going on then. We love you guys out there. Be good and
Be safe.
peace.
Thanks for having us, Brian.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Peace. What a good podcast, folks.
Just stop it.
I'll stop it right now. I'll cut off then.
That
yeah,
was. How long
stop
did
it
we
there.
talk for?
Almost 2 hours.
Oh wow.
Yeah. I already told you in advance that the time would fly once you start doing this.
Yeah, it
Yes, it
did
does.
actually. It didn't feel like that.
Because
No.
it's so good to have these
Yeah.
conversations. You don't notice the passing of time. You don't fucking
Right.
care about it because you're expressing thoughts and you're absorbing thoughts and you're reacting to it. And it's this
Yeah.
fun mental tennis.